Hi, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Film Studies Online discussion, where we will be talking about the movie Punch Drunk Love that was so ably introduced and smartly selected by my colleague, Lisa DeNight. Excuse me. Lisa, how are you tonight?
Doing very well. Happy Valentine's Day, Andrew.
To you as well. And thank you for suggesting a movie that is perfect for today, but not, in my mind, not too on the nose, which is always preferable. So we should have some good points to discuss about this movie. I know we already started, so I can only imagine when more folks join us that there'll be even more to talk about. When you are into this Zoom conversation, please keep your audio on mute unless you're asking a question or making a comment. I will call on you to do that, please, and I will know to call on you because you will hopefully use the raise hand function within Zoom, marked by a 2 at the bottom of your screen right now, just to point it out. In addition, we will have the chat going, and you should feel free to make additional comments in there, introduce yourself to us or others, or if you have a response to something someone else posts, feel free to share that. Of course, always being very polite and neighborly and collegial about all of it. And with that, I imagine we are ready to get going. I can guess we've got 2 hands up already, and tonight, as is often, though not always the case, it is the Glusmans by a nose. So Glusmans, welcome. What do you have to say about this movie?
Well, I'm not sure what by a nose means, but I would suggest, Lisa, that the complexity of the decision-making for Valentine's Day is right in line with the complexity of how I viewed Adam Sandler's performance. As Andrew has taught us over these 2 years, one of the things I always try to do with movies is watch them as if it's the day or the year that they came out. And I think about how somebody would have looked at Adam Sandler and his performance at that point in this amazingly complicated love story. It's got more unlovable twists and turns. At some level, it's hard to equate phone sex with love, but to each their own. And how Lena can understand his background and yet be drawn to love him. So the complexity of your thought process for this clearly, at least it hits home with me. A couple of points and questions for you. I was watching some of these saying, are they dream sequences or did this happen? And quite honestly, I was left thinking, I don't know. Did he really successfully attack the 4 thugs after the truck rammed his car and sent Lena to the hospital? At first, I thought not, but afterwards, I was beginning to think it's real. I was trying to define personality disorders, spectrum, manic. And Lisa, what is she thinking as she knows she's falling in love with a seriously injured personality? And Adam Sandler, you might know the answer. Did the director actually chat with Sandler about how this was going to go before he made the casting decision? I can just imagine Sandler and Goddard sitting there talking about what they anticipated in the script. Hopefully I've given you a little something to start off on, as is very, very often the case. Amazing choice. Thank you. And thank you, Bryn Mawr Film Institute, for making me watch this movie. I had not seen it.
Well, thanks very much for that, David. By a nose, I meant I was simply sure that you didn't edge Gene out by much, though you did edge him out, and that's not always the case. I also would commend both you and Gene on your backgrounds, your avatars for tonight's discussion. Both are very much right on point.
Janice challenged me to do something, and I'm not used to doing this stuff on my Zoom, but I had to do something for her and for you.
Well, we appreciate it, certainly, and
I'm glad I can inspire.
It's nice to know that I'm sure Gene is glad have more folks at the party.
I like
So,
the competition there.
I'm sorry. Okay.
I like his competition for background.
Yep.
His took a piece of the movie that certainly changed the tenor of the movie.
Agreed. I think you brought up a number of interesting points. The first one that I'm pretty sure Lisa will have something to say about has to do with the casting of Sandler. And I'm wondering if you'd like to say a bit about that, Lisa.
Sure. Although I'll start off by saying I must have an old Zoom version because I don't see any avatars. I feel like I'm missing out. I just see a blank screen with Glucksman written. So I'm sorry I'm missing out on some additional detail. But thank you for all of your comments. As always, you always, when you are number one, you start us off so well. Sandler's casting. So Paul Thomas Anderson wrote this role for Adam Sandler. He was a big fan of Adam Sandler's lowbrow comedies, loved Sandler's persona, and wanted to explicitly work with Adam Sandler on something. And it just so happened after he was done with this almost 3-hour magnum opus that was Magnolia, he wanted to come back down to earth, make something lighter, more comedic, more romantic, and thought, hey, this is absolutely perfect for Sandler. And Sandler himself was a little nervous about this role because he had never been in anything, quote unquote, dramatic before. He was afraid that he was going to mess up this film from such a renowned director, a director that he really respected after seeing some of his films. So to me, it is perfect, inspired casting because it does kind of force you to view Sandler's more famous roles, more famous persona through a different lens. It's both trading on that persona and perhaps the most real version of that persona that has ever been committed to film. So it was a perfect casting choice and one that Anderson was very explicitly writing for in this.
I think that if you, David, or anyone else who is a bit curious about the casting and wants to get a fuller sense of why it makes sense, I would urge you to Google and read Roger Ebert's review of this movie, where he makes a very strong case that this character in this movie is really very much like the Adam Sandler characters we expect in The Waterboy or some of those other movies, Billy Madison, those ones for which he became most famous and which were enormously popular at the time, is really, and watching the movie, I mean, if you think about it, I think it's really a really very fair point. I mean, what is he in those movies? I don't know if any of you has seen any of those movies. It's been years since I have, but I have, and he is basically someone with a good heart who is misunderstood and frequently underestimated and or belittled by those around him, usually those around him who should be among the last people to do that, like in this movie, his sisters. And he lashes out and does so by resorting to the only things thanks, Jill, for putting that in the chat. Jill put the link to the Ebert review in the chat. But he lashes out by resorting to the things his character is able to do, but it's always some version of bottled up rage. And I think the way to think about it is that this is really entirely consistent with those movies. It's a very similar character, but the character is occupying a different world. He's occupying the world that Paul Thomas Anderson creates, which is closer, although certainly not really close to the real world, but it's a bit more of a grounded world in its own way than the worlds of the comedies of Adam Sandler. But the character's really not much different. To the other point you brought up, and which is I think very interesting, is, you know, what is Lena getting into? Why is she getting into it? What does she see that we presumably and others don't? Lisa, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I do. And I'm sure this is a question that perhaps a lot of you have. Less a question for me. I just completely buy their chemistry entirely. But what I love, and my answer is going to be maybe a little bit of a cop out. What I love about this film is that it is about this transformative nature of unexpected connections, unexpected romantic connections, and how amazingly mysterious those can be, to both the individual and to the people, you know, looking in. And Anderson doesn't, I don't know, cheapen the mystery of romance by giving us this complete explanation for why Lena would be interested in Barry. It's just all in the performance and less in the dialogue. It's in the emotion that is made tangible by the cinematic, I guess, kaleidoscope of colors and sounds. Emotions are very kind of tangibly represented in this film. And some people may decide that that's not enough for them to completely buy into this romance, but just for me, it's very telling. Her eyes are just so piercingly fixed on him, and he is such an interesting, fascinating character to her, and that comes through in her performance magnificently. But it certainly doesn't spell out entirely why these two would be drawn to each other.
I think that's all true, and I think that, you know, we've all known couples where we don't understand it. Perhaps it is the couple we are a part of. Perhaps it is couples that we are friends with. I have friends, and I have to say, usually it's someone I know from college, and I look at their wife and I say, why is that smart, fun, accomplished woman interested in that doofus, let alone interested in being married to him for now decades? And the answer is I don't know. I don't have access to that guy I know from college, to the side of him that is in the romantic relationship. And so I don't know. I don't know what that relationship is like. And now in the movie, we get to see things, but we also, there are things we don't see. She says that she saw a picture of him that his sister had, and she had to meet him. We don't know what that picture was. We don't know what it showed, what he looked like. But what we do know is, as some of you have said in the chat, and as Lisa said, she sees these qualities in him, and the qualities that she finds, you know, appealing and worthy of love, and you know, as positives, obviously outweigh the negatives. The other thing I would say is that, you know, I once went to a talk by a political analyst, one of those people you see on CNN who prognosticates about elections, and this guy said, it was before one of the presidential elections, and he said, my guess would be is that this candidate's going to win because this candidate is about pretty much the opposite of the current president, and that's what America tends to do. It tends to go from sort of lurch, you know, from one extreme to the other, and usually if they get tired of a person, they'll go for the person that's farthest from that person. I think some people view their relationships like that. We don't know who Lena was dating before, but maybe she was dating someone who was the opposite of him in some ways, and she found the things about him that we find either problematic or sort of, you know, kind of nothing, that's what she needed at that point in her life. I think that you know, you can't really ever fully explain these things, as Lisa said, so maybe it's better that the movie doesn't try, and either we accept it or we don't. Gene, your questions or comments?
Hi. For my comments, I can add something to the conversation about his casting and how he approached the role. I spoke to him briefly on a radio show, and I said, it's my favorite film of yours, and can you tell me a little bit about working with Paul Thomas Anderson? And he, in a very humble way, he said, I surrendered myself to him and just did whatever he told me to do, which I'm sure it wasn't that simple, but I think he probably saw it as new territory that he didn't fully trust in himself and completely surrendered himself to Anderson. So that was interesting to hear. I remember just a couple quick comments, and then I have a question. I remember I saw it when it first came out in a theater, and I went with my ex-wife, and we left the theater, and she absolutely hated it because of how unnerving it made her. Because from the very first few minutes of the film, it moves like a locomotive, and you have no time to breathe. And I think he wants us to feel the anxiety that Adam Sandler feels, and it's very successful. And so it has that much power over certain people. What I really loved about it, and I didn't even mention how much I do love the film, and I've seen it many times. Maybe you have some thoughts on this. I just think that in the hands of another filmmaker, there are several scenes here that could easily fail and become overly sentimental or even just plain corny. Like, that classic moment at the end when he's facing Philip Seymour Hoffman in this almost like old-fashioned saloon type of scene where Hoffman's getting his hair cut. He walks up to him and he says, "I have so much strength inside of me, you have no idea. I have a love in my life and it makes me stronger than anything you can imagine." That moment could fail so easily. Or things like being in the phone booth when he's in, where did he go? Hawaii? Now I'm forgetting.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hawaii, right. And he's waiting for her to answer the phone, and it's getting to be dusk, and as soon as she says hello, the light in the phone booth goes on. Little things like that are so magical. And I just love that any fear of going over the top is thrown away in this film, which I really appreciate. But I don't know, I'm wondering if you have thoughts on why it works under Anderson's hand and where it might not by other directors. All right, well, I'll leave it at that, and then if there's time later, I'll come back with another question.
Thanks, Gene. I think that's an interesting point, an interesting thing to think about. Why do these moments land, if not all of them, more often than not? And when you're right, we could see them going sort of falling flat, or worse, seeming like parody. I have a thought, but I'm wondering, Lisa, if you have any ideas on this.
It's a great question, and I will admit and agree that this is such a unique movie. It's just the perfect combination of ingredients to pull this off. And if you had eliminated any one of them, it would just have never worked. It would have imploded on itself. This is something that David Glessman brought up earlier, how the film does kind of feel like it's either a dream or a reality, or kind of, you can't really tell which one you're in at times. And the film's success, I think, is to place us so deeply within Barry's interiority, and then exteriorize that, or make that interiority the like literal cinematic tapestry of this film. And I think only in that very heightened tension between interiority and exteriority can sentences like the one that his monologue to the mattress man. I mean, only in that tension between interior and exterior, and just absolute violence and cacophony and lyricism. That tension is very key to making this film work. It's so earnest. It really is. Andrew and I were talking earlier about how baldly symbolic practically every single physical item is in this film, and just that sheer earnestness that stems from that tension of interior versus exterior, I think, is what makes this film work. I'm curious for Andrew.
I think that there are two things that allow us to take those moments as intended, at least most viewers, I think, to take those moments as intended. I think the first one is that Anderson is a very disciplined filmmaker, and he introduces and occasionally sort of sprinkles in these elements that tell us that no matter how much this looks like the world no matter how much these people walk and talk and sound like the people you would see on the streets of Los Angeles, this isn't exactly the world you're living in, because a cab stops and someone discards a harmonium, because there's a car accident that happens but nobody seems to pay attention to, because there is that recurring moving van and other things. But those, just the right amount to allow us to sort of most of the time perceive this world as the world where most sort of regular dramas take place, but then just occasionally remind us that it's not that world. And so if we're occasionally reminded, it's not a magical world, it's not a fantasy world, this isn't Walter Mitty or anything like that, but it's not exactly the world we're currently living in. And so if that's the case, why can't these things about their relationship and his newfound courage and all those things, actually, why can't those happen, and why can't those work, those demonstrations of those things? The other point, I think, the other reason it works is we see at other points in the movie how committed, or I should say, the commitment, the lengths of commitment of which Adam Sandler's character is capable. He's not always able to do it, but we see how committed he is to, think what it must have taken for an awkward introvert with rage issues like him to build a successful business that is really all about basically selling to people, selling novelty items to people. That must have taken a tremendous amount of commitment. Think of the commitment it's taken for him to maintain a relationship with all those sisters who are so smothering and terrible to him. Think about the commitment he has demonstrated, and I think this is why the frequent flyer miles thing works and fits in this movie. The commitment he demonstrates to that, and how much he knows what other people will think, and he doesn't really let that stop him. So I think so someone with that level of commitment is someone who would believe that the power of love that he has never felt before, from what by all accounts seems like a very good person, that would make him feel invulnerable. That would make him feel like he has power he never had before. I think it gets established at that point. True Ken, very committed to the blue suit as well. Unfailingly committed to the royal blue suit. Lisa, yeah.
That was like a perfectly timed comment, because I was going to agree with you, Andrew, that the kind of obsessiveness to his character, that the commitment that he shows, and frankly the kind of repressed creativity. I mean, the pudding thing is just, it's such a fascinating little nugget that kind of shows us he has all this like energy and creativity and has nowhere to put it but pudding. But the blue suits, like, yes, he is he's determined enough in some of these aspects that Andrew just illuminated. But I love that this film kind of begins with Barry deciding to just put on a new suit. Like he bought this blue suit for no ostensible reason. It just, I guess, occurred to him that he should buy this suit. And by that, like, one little change invites this, entire crazy, confluence of events into his life, I feel, and clearly not that one-to-one, but by being open to one little change in your life, you can have the entire world just completely turned upside down in your favor or not. But he was open to making a change. And I feel like costume choices are so deeply important in all of Anderson's films, but certainly I think that the costume choices in this film are worthy of much thought.
It's a suit of armor, right? He wears it, and in part you could imagine, I don't think you would have thought of this rationally, but perhaps an unanticipated perk of it is that when he sees his sisters, instead of making fun of something else about him, they make fun of the suit. And then they're talking about the suit. It protects him. It shields him from an even worse and more personal insult. And then it's the suit of armor. It gives him the strength to court this woman that he can pretend he's someone else. That's his costume to do that. And then it gives him strength when he goes out and he attacks those brothers. He sees that they've hurt her, and that tears it for him, and he feels that partly has the confidence because of it. So I think it makes a lot of sense. The way you were talking about that. Stephen, do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, first I'd just say I wish I had changed my picture to match the movie. But I love the movie. I don't know exactly why. I think I felt like I was awash in sensations, and it made me think of some descriptions of autism, or some level of that kind of overload of senses. And I think that was mirrored in the soundtrack, because there was a lot of subtle other music and noises and tones outside of like a bit what you would expect in a general soundtrack. I watched all the way through to the credits because I just wanted to keep hearing and seeing and it also came through on like the colors, because he went off to abstract art almost in some of the colors, as was in the case of the other person's photo. So that's pretty much it. I was wondering if there was any comment on what the piano or harmonium stood for, if it stood for anything.
Well, thanks, Stephen. Yeah, I think this wasn't nearly as sort of widely, I think it wasn't as widely known or discussed in popular culture as it is today, but the notion of someone being sort of on the autism spectrum, I can see why you sort of thought that. And I think that there are things in the movie, both in his character's behavior, but also those sort of things outside his person that you talk about. What are those sounds? Why? We understand why I can understand why there are interludes, these sort of pauses of these shifting colors, but what is that? Why that choice? And I mean, partly the colors that are shifting is, if we could look at, Gene's icon, is, it's it's a combination, it's a blending of his color of his suit and the color of her outfit, her primary outfit. So there's that element to it. But why so much abstraction? So I wondered about that a bit myself, and I don't know that there's been any sort of confirmation of that element of things, but I mean it seems wholly plausible. And it would, that could have been the sort of, he could have been different in that way from his sisters, and that would have been enough for that motley crew to pick on him, certainly. So I think that's an interesting point. Lisa, did you have any thoughts on what Steven said?
Yeah, I have a couple acquaintances who have ADHD, and they have described that they've never seen a movie that more accurately captures what it's like to navigate their brain. So the autism element, I think, is also a very compelling point at which to enter this film in terms of what we viewers can kind of take out and understand better about Barry, or perhaps people like Barry. To me, I wouldn't qualify myself as an introvert, but I can almost feel like I understand what it must be like to be an introvert, and in those scenes where or a painful introvert, I should say, when Barry is going into his sister's house, and the door opening and closing a couple times, and then he finally forces himself in, and the sound design is so key to, again, I'm going to come back to like externalizing Barry's interiority in the cinematic fabric, and the colors as well. Andrew did a great job kind of penning that, but the emotions are just so tangible in this film. They're tangible in the music, in the colors, and the harmonium. You asked about the harmonium, so I'll transition into that. It I don't think it has a clear one-to-one, but what I like to think about for the harmonium is that it is the symbol of love slash being open to love slash Lena, the object of his love. And I think the movie makes this very concrete when Barry has this kind of moment of clarity. This is an object of mystery to him. He's kind of like banged out a couple notes here and there. It's very attractive to him. And then this moment of almost like a eureka moment where he picks up the harmonium and runs at top speed and brings it right to Lena, and the two are kind of coalescing into a harmonious concept of love. And finally, I think this is really drawn to a fine point at the end, the very last shot where Barry is playing the harmonium. He is playing the same melody that is the soundtrack of the film. So there's like non-diegetic music and diegetic music in harmony together. And then Lena comes in and embraces him. So it's a symbol of love slash Lena slash being open to love is my explanation of the harmonium.
And if I could,
go ahead.
I just want to add one other thing. It felt very artistic. And from that sense, I mean, like a Julie Taymor or a Julian Schnabel kind of movie where they're playing with the whole palette, that, it's not just, storyline and pictures. There's a lot of additional information in the movies, and that was it.
Yeah, no, there are non-narrative elements, and that is, I think you used the term palette, and that's interesting. That's a tool that all filmmakers have that they can bring even to narrative films, but it has to be used wisely and conservatively, because too much of that can go beyond adding insight or enriching the picture and go too far and push the audience away. And I speak as someone who has, turned against many a movie that I was led to believe were narrative and then turned out to be non-narrative. This is a narrative movie but he does use those extra narrative elements, extra diegetic elements, diegetic elements, but also, things that are outside the narrative and the world of the narrative. And the other thing I think about the harmonium is it's something that's his. It's something that, the way I imagine he's holding on to it any way he can to run away with it. But the way he saves it from getting run over, right? It's something that needs him. And before he knows what his relationship with Lena will turn into, he's interested, he's curious, but he doesn't know what that will be yet. He has something that is his, something that needs him, something that he has a closer relationship with than anyone he works with will, than his sisters can, than anyone. And that's part of the reason why it's interesting. He puts it front and center where everybody can see it, but he talks very little about it. He has something, and he wants some of those people at least to know he has something. And so I think part of the reason it exists is to show us his capacity and his desire for emotional connection and intimacy of some kind. And that sort of gets reinforced when at the end, he's playing it, and he's having his private time with the harmonium, and then Lena comes in, and it's, those two sort of sections or segments of his emotional life, joined together.
And if I can just add on to that,
Yeah.
Beautiful description, Andrew. It is something that's his, and it's also something that needs a little work. Like, it has a tear that he fixes, and it has, compartments that need to be opened, and it's, maybe not in the best shape, but he works to improve it. And I think, maybe we're kind of in real time expanding this symbol to even kind of encapsulate the relationship that he and Lena does share, because he is willing to share and also work on something that is special to him.
Lisa Marie, do you have a question or comment?
Thank you, Andrew. Wow, I really appreciate everyone's, oh, how funny. I appreciate everyone's perception and insight into this film. I felt under the shadow of surrealistic comedy, because we laughed quite a bit, Jason, my partner here, and I watched it last night, and we laughed quite a bit through the whole thing. But what really, really drew my attention was the filmography. Different places where the film took us into corridors where he just felt like Adam Sandler was walking and walking and walking, and there was this endless corridor, and usually with like three entrances, if that makes sense, 3 portals to get through. There was always a number there. And I noticed that almost every single space didn't have anything on the walls. The walls were bare. The furnishings were bare. The first scenes where he was sitting at his desk, like there was nothing around him in that warehouse. And I also think that the colors of the wardrobe, the blue suit and the red that Lena was wearing, when she was with him, she wore that red dress in all of the scenes that she was with him, and not in the scene when he showed up in Hawaii without her knowing it. And I think all of those, those angles that were shown, The sparseness of the road in the first scene, where the car just came tumbling through the road. I agree, it made me feel very intense in the beginning, and he kept looking around corners, and then there would be this vast corridor that he had to walk through. And then his sister, when he was confronted by his sister, and she was surrounding him, like the way that it was filmed. So it felt like he was boxed in one of the scenes, and you could see the way it was filmed, with the big cabinet behind him. And he was getting more and more boxed in that film, in that scene. And then the corridors, and then looking around the corners, gave an edge to it. And I stopped at some point in this film trying to get something out of the character development, because I didn't feel like the characters were as developed as I need to. But once I just decided to ride with it, I could feel the surrealistic metaphors coming out of him being boxed, of him being circled by his sister, his inability to get out of those situations and being stuck in those situations. Yeah, the filmography was very, very fascinating to me. We listened to Lisa's introduction after we watched the film, and I thought that was very, she did such an articulate job of describing this film. And before we did that, I said, I think this whole thing is about the pudding. And the pudding, it's all about the pudding. And it was funny when we heard her speak about this. So and this is a cougar here in Colorado, that if you see this on our square, and she and her cougar partner caught this giant elk. I forgot that I had this on here.
Well, thank you very much, Lisa Marie. I think your point about the sort of the geography of the film, Kim mentioned that in the chat as well. He sort of asked, what are with all the hallways? And I think you expanded that notion out. It certainly is the hallways, but it's also the other passages, and it's the empty streets, and it's, his sense of wandering. And someone else earlier mentioned the way he kept coming in, opening and sort of closing the door at his sister's house. I think a lot of these things are ways, and Lisa said this at the beginning, to give a perceptible external representation of his internal feeling, and I have to say anxiety. You talked about how the opening scene when he's at his desk, it seems like there's sort of two garage bays next to each other. One is just his office, or an empty one that he has a desk in, because he also has an office in the other one. But he's, we see him at the beginning, and he's in this big empty space, and we see him, how far he travels down these empty streets, or these empty hallways, or these unmarked hallways, and how many times we see that. And I think that's, I think these are all ways to show us how he feels in the world. Those of you who've taken our classes at the Institute, taken classes I've taught at the Institute, or come to enough of these, have heard me say this probably 100 times, but one of the hardest things to convey in a motion picture well is what a character is feeling inside, and what it is like to be inside their head or inside their skin. It's hard to do that in ways that don't seem sort of, didactic or patronizing, or just sort of, a burden to the viewer. And this is one way to do that. And I think that's, again, we don't know if that's, we see, the movie opens, and that car that crashes, it sort of seems to be a sort of a one car accident without cause, right? And so I said earlier, this is a world that looks a lot like ours, but it's not exactly like ours. And so are those hallways really empty? Are those streets really empty? Or is that how he feels? And that's what we're seeing. In some sense, it doesn't matter because they're there for us to perceive and to try to make meaning out of, as you sort of walked us through, I think very constructively, Lisa Marie. Yeah, I think there's a lot to these seemingly mundane settings because they're not. I don't think they may be mundane, but they're not, irrelevant.
Yeah, and it just felt so surreal, like deeply surreal, this whole film. It just did. I kept imagining Dolly's paintings, and it just felt really surreal. And I don't know if anybody feels like this right now, everything that we've been living through in the last couple of years with COVID, how very surreal life can feel. If anybody feels empathetic to the characters, both of them, Lena and Adam Sandler's character.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think you. I'm sorry, at least if I cut you off. I don't think you. I don't think we needed. I mean, I've seen this movie before, including before the pandemic. I don't think we need. I didn't need the pandemic to feel some empathy toward them. But what I will say is that I think many of us have probably been surprised by the things we took for granted that now seem like such, or the prospect of them seems like such a treat. Seems like it will be something worth looking forward to. I mean, having a meeting at work with all of my colleagues in the same room. I mean, who among us didn't used to dread those, right? But won't it be nice, at least the first time, maybe, depending on your workplace, to have that again? And the things that some of the point of this movie is the things that some people take for granted. Some people are able to take for granted. Not everyone can take for granted. The ability to talk to one's siblings and go to a family gathering and not feel like, you're running the gauntlet where you're going to be, bludgeoned. Hopefully most of us can take that for granted, but not everybody can. And I think on some level, this movie's about that. The things that some of us can take for granted in a relationship or interpersonal sense, this character can't. And we see what it's like to be that way. I'm sorry, Lisa.
Not at all. Lisa Marie, I'm so glad you and Jason enjoyed this. So I have a couple things I just wanted to add on to this. You saying surreal a bunch of times brought joy to my heart, because one of my favorite details about this is Paul Thomas Anderson won Best Director for this film at the Cannes Film Festival in 2002. And the jury was helmed by one David Lynch, master of cinematic surreal. So I can only imagine that David Lynch was watching this movie and be like, I like this because of how surreal it is. It is very surreal and delightful. And I'm also so glad you found it funny, because I feel like someone else said earlier how this movie just kind of discombobulated them. And to me, that I've seen it so many times, and every time it is a mood and mind altering substance. It just exists on a different playing field, but it is so funny. And comedy is subjective, but I laugh so much in this film and just have my jaw kind of like agape the whole 90-minute runtime. And thank you for lovely descriptions of how boxed in every set is, and I appreciated the comments in the chat about this too. The sense of entrapment in the physical spaces is so pervasive, and that opening shot is just one of the best opening shots. He's this big expanse. He's all the way in the corner in this desk and with the bare walls, as you mentioned. Yeah, and the only other detail that I'll add is that there's a lot of glass entrapment as well. I think he even runs into a glass door at one time, and the oft repeated family story about how he threw a hammer through sliding glass door. That you get the sense, even when there's this one anecdote about young Barry thrown out, that he has always felt so deeply entrapped by the emotional and physical spaces around him. When he is very angry that he won't be able to fly to Hawaii with his pudding tickets immediately, and he punches the map on his wall, he's kind of punching Southern California. So the geography of extremely tight, endless spaces is just such a great theme in this film. It makes Hawaii seem all the more like paradise when it opens up wide and there are no corridors to run through.
Before we get to Gene again, I just wanted to respond to something that Ken put in the chat about that final in-person in Utah confrontation between Barry and Dean. I think it's Barry standing up to the bully that to all the bullies that he's had in his life. And as they often tell you, I'm not certain it's true, but as they often tell you that, bullies are powered by fear. And when someone doesn't respond to that fear or presents something to be afraid of for them, they tend to crumble. And that's what we saw in that instance. I mean, I found that I was glad it didn't sort of turn violent. I was glad that it was sort of a battle of personalities and sort of, emotional strength. Oh, Gene, we have someone who hasn't commented yet, so I'll come to you after her. Dana, what do you have to say? Oh, Dana went away.
Here I am.
Okay, good.
Sorry, I unmuted my hand.
Go ahead.
So, so let's see. I think the timing of my seeing this movie was not good for me because I saw Licorice Pizza a week ago. So it took away what some of the elements that people really enjoyed about this movie were, because I think Licorice Pizza was a romantic comedy that was just wonderful. And this was a romantic comedy that just didn't make it. But it also makes me think about the general body of work of Paul Thomas Anderson. I really, really like him. I like so many of the things that he's done. And there are things about this movie, I don't want to say too much because if people haven't seen Licorice Pizza, it's not really a fair thing to do. But there's so many things that I think might have been little mistakes or things that were overdone or things that just didn't work that he changed and amended, and they just worked so well in Licorice Pizza. I could see his growth as a director. I don't want to be too specific because, again, I don't want to bring that into it. But I think it's really fun sometimes to look at movies with particularly a director like this one who does movies which are so different, and seeing where they grow. And for me, there was huge growth between Punch Drunk Love and Licorice Pizza. So I just recommend to people to go and see it and see what you come up with if you feel the same way. But so I just thought I would throw that out because, as I said, I think I probably did this backwards. And therefore, I think I lost out on Punch Drunk Love. So that's all I got for you guys.
Oh, thanks, Dana. I'm one of those people who hasn't seen Licorice Pizza yet, so I don't really have anything to say about that. But you're right. I mean, people, everybody swings and misses sometimes, or everyone, I wouldn't say misses, but maybe fouls one off. You don't get it quite right. And then you try again. So it's possible that that's something that's happening here. Elisa, did you have anything to say on the two movies?
I'm very glad you loved Licorice Pizza. I certainly would not hold placing Licorice Pizza above Punch Drunk Love against anyone. I do agree that this is such an amazing director to watch because he is always constantly evolving. I don't think that means that something like Boogie Nights or Punch Drunk Love is any less good, personally speaking, than say Licorice Pizza, but it's different, and it is very compelling to dive deep into this guy's filmography, because his films really talk to each other in such interesting ways that they have very similar themes running throughout, even if certainly your take is that there's an evolution in refinement in style with that that same body of preoccupations and themes. I highly recommend everyone check out Licorice Pizza. I love them both equally, but highly recommend it.
Ken, you have a question or comment?
It's interesting. We saw Boogie Nights, Licorice Pizza, and Punch Drunk Love all within a week. And in looking, even though there was a 20-year gap between Licorice Pizza and Punch Drunk Love, there was clearly growth and difference in terms of what he focused on. But I thought that there was not a wasted scene in Punch Drunk Love. And with Licorice Pizza, I might have edited a couple of scenes out if I were an editor. But Punch Drunk Love just struck me as being spare. There was nothing in this film, whether it was the harmonium, whether it was the love of the employees for Sandler, which at times is hard to understand. There was nothing wasted in that film. Every scene seemed to have a place. So, for what it's worth, if we were making our list of, in what order, I would put Punch Drunk Love and its sensory impact ahead of Licorice Pizza.
Okay. Well, thanks. Gene, your question or comment?
Yeah, well, just to follow up that thought, I kind of feel Punch Drunk Love almost feels like a musical to me, because so much of it is rhythmic, and I think everything is there like a track on an album, and to take something out would change the whole rhythm of the film. It all feels essential to me. But
you mean Licorice Pizza?
No, Punch.
Oh, you meant Punch Drunk Love. Okay.
Yeah. First of all, I just want to say somebody we haven't mentioned yet, who I think has gave me some of my biggest laughs in the film, was Louise Guzman, and in such an understated way. He has so many hysterical moments, like when Lena is asking Barry out in front of all the employees. Louise he's just standing there staring straight ahead because he doesn't want to interfere, but you can tell he's listening intensely to every moment of this, and he's feeling so good for Barry. I loved him in it. One thing when I heard you talking about why Lena might be attracted to Barry, one thing that came to me the first time I saw it was that even though Barry is so quirky and has so many flaws, to someone like her who admits that she's traveling all the time, I thought for her he had a life that had an anchor in it, and he had a business and he was safe, and I think that was something that appealed to her a lot too, because she likely had a very unstable existence with all of her travel. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point, and it's certainly one answer that we sort of can make sense to us all, that it's not one of those mysteries of love. There's something sort of accessible there, I think. Let's see, David, you had another thought.
I did. I was going back to the personality question that I partially raised about Lena and Sandler's character, and go to that scene in the hotel room in Hawaii. First of all, they're fully clothed in bed, which is just such a lark. He's still got a suit on and his tie is mostly tied. but they start with this romantic talk, quote unquote, and she starts talking about nibbling on his cheek, and he responds with these way over the top, things that one might say are either inappropriate, or, as it seems to turn out, the two of them, and the phrase that came to my mind when they talked about different parts of each other that they were going to devour was they're feeding on each other, and their personalities truly did feed off of each other. Whatever her background was with her failed marriage, and however we see each other when, we block out the negatives and we take in the positives, and that becomes the drunkenness, as the title says, of love. And the more I thought about that scene as we're talking about it, the less I think that they're as damaged as we thought they were at the beginning. So, any thoughts, or it's just a comment? But there's so many scenes that, as you think back, you can dissect.
I think that was very well said, David. I don't have anything to add to that, but I think you explained that really well, in a way that expands my appreciation of that scene, which is probably one of the ones I found most confusing in the movie. So that's interesting. Lisa.
Thank you for that description of that. I don't think I could do better myself, but I will add a little bit onto what you expressed. One moment that always kind of stands out to me is when Barry, after his little outburst at the family dinner, he takes one of the brother-in-laws into a room and essentially asks him if he can help him. He doesn't like himself very much, and he says he doesn't know how other people are. And I feel like that is just such an accurate statement for Barry if we're taking him as a real individual. And so I love that scene in the hotel room, because it seems like Barry doesn't quite know just how to respond to Lena's she started it and she started it in a way that I feel like we can all kind of accept, even if it is a little on the strange side. But he doesn't know, he doesn't quite have that level of sophistication maybe, so he just kind of takes it into a different level. And Lena also is such an oddball that you could read it as she either goes with it and then takes it a step further, or she kind of understands, intuits that Barry doesn't really want to smash her face in with a sledgehammer. It's just such a great scene, and it illuminates that they do have this kind of oddball connection with each other. They're both kind of oddballs, but yet they also can intuit each other's difference, or they're willing to kind of dance around each other's differences to learn more about where to go for the next step. It's such a great scene. I love it, and you did such a great job of describing why it's great and expanding. I hope for others as well. It's what's on its face kind of a very upsetting set of dialogue, but I think reveals a lot about the characters.
It really was upsetting, and Janice and I too, our initial reaction was being taken aback and upset by it. And it was only upon reflection that I appreciated it in its context and in its depth.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's great. I mean, that's one of the things I like about these discussions is there are plenty of things I don't understand in the world and in movies, and having the sort of the group share their thoughts is often very illuminating. This is just the latest example. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. tonight. Lisa, thank you so much for suggesting this movie and helping us begin to make the most out of it. We appreciate it. And it was, I think, a wonderful and inspired selection for today of all days. We have some other things coming up in film studies, a couple of seminars we have on the schedule so far. We have more that we will be announcing in the coming weeks. You can join us for these in the theater on site like we used to and like we are doing, or you can attend via our remote classroom, attend them virtually. We have a lot of things going on at BMFI, both on site and online. So we look forward to seeing you there. If you know a high school student who is interested in filmmaking or wants to learn about filmmaking and does not yet have plans for the summer, point them toward our summer filmmaking workshop. It's a great opportunity for a small group of students to get a lot of hands-on experience and to learn a great deal about the collaborative art of filmmaking. We've got more information about this on our website, and we're glad to have it back to be able to offer it again this summer after having to take a couple of summers off for obvious reasons. We also have a lot going on at the theaters. We have a lot of the Oscar nominees on screen, and there's plenty of other things going on for members and non-members alike at BMFI. So please check out our website to see what's coming up. We've got a lot of interesting movies on now and more coming up in the coming weeks. So we certainly hope to see you there. And whether you're able to come in or not, if you have the means and opportunity to give us a little extra support, we would greatly appreciate it. Everything you attend at BMFI, every course, every movie, every special event really helps a great deal. But as you know, ticket fees only or tuition only cover a small percentage of the cost of running BMFI and bringing all this programming to you. So if and when you're able to make an additional contribution, we certainly always appreciate it. Please also sign up for our emails. The education email this Thursday will let you know what our March film will be, and we'll have a link to the introduction for it. So I look forward to seeing you all next month, if not sooner, at BMFI. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you, guys, that was great.
Thank you.